everybody. I'm Mary Daniels from CFUW Kanata, one of the Ottawa clubs that organised this event. Since it began in 1919, CFUW has worked to promote equality, social justice, and lifelong learning for women and girls. And currently, we have clubs across Canada with about 7,500 members. We acknowledge that we're fortunate to live in Ottawa, which is built on traditional unceded land of the Anishinaabe people. We further acknowledge that Indigenous peoples have lived in harmony with their environment for thousands of years, and we can learn much from them. Before we meet our guests, a brief word about our program. This is the second of 3 webinars about the environmental crises looming large in our lives. Fostering deeper understanding about challenges ahead will prepare us better to take practical steps to meet those challenges. So we invited experts to share their knowledge. Last week, Rebecca Prince-Ruiz discussed the plastics dilemma, and she gave us updates on recent legislation and practical tips on how to reduce our dependence on plastics. Rebecca's presentation was recorded, so if you missed it, it will be available on YouTube at the end of this series. This week, Diana Beresford-Kroeger and Bill Steer are here to help us understand the significance of our vast boreal forest, why we need to learn about its complex life cycle, why we must protect it, and how we can take an active role in tackling the problems caused by human intervention. You will see and hear only the presenters on your screen, but there will be an opportunity towards the end of the hour for you to ask questions. So if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and it will be relayed to Diana and Bill. Now, for the next precious hour, 2 wise and generous counselors will share their deep understanding of our natural world, gained from decades of observing, learning, and engaging fully in it. First, let me introduce Bill Steer, who's sitting there in his, well, he's outside somewhere. Bill likes to be outside. So Bill, this energetic and multi-talented man, is the founder and general manager of the Canadian Ecology Centre. This is a non-profit experiential education and research facility located in Samuel de Champlain Provincial Park near Ottawa, Ontario. By his own admission, Bill is happiest when he's outside, and most of his work experience has been in environmental education in the near north. He organizes and leads challenging field trips for all ages and stages. Bill's intriguing research interests include studying behavior patterns and spatial awareness of lost persons in the outdoors. His interest in non-human animal behaviors has contributed to wolf research in Algonquin Park. Bill is director of the National Green Check GPS program that administers geomatics certification. And geomatics has transformed field surveying, position locating, and mapping. He teaches senior geography for Nipissing University's Faculty of Education and geomatics in the Environmental Technician program at Canada College. And we must recognize his long-term commitment to CBC's Near North programming by producing videos and podcasts about his explorations and adventures on the back roads of Ontario. And now, Dr. Diana Beresford-Kroeger. Diana is recognized internationally as an authority in the world of plants. She's a medical biochemist, a botanist, and organic chemist who learned her lessons not only from scientific experiments and years of hands-on experience in labs, in fields, in forests, in ditches, and in swamps, but also notably from planting her own forest in her own backyard. She has also learned unexpectedly from fortune's sometimes perverse influences. But Diana is so much more than her subject expertise. She's an eloquent writer, author of 7 books and a movie that explains scientific complexities in clear yet lyrical prose that is often poetic. Diana uses ancient history and folklore to reveal the validity of old ways, now largely forgotten or dismissed, yet they are more relevant than ever in our 21st century life. It's my great pleasure to welcome Bill Spear and Diana Beresford-Kroeger, who will speak for the trees. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Mary, and the Canadian Federation of University Women, particularly the Ottawa chapters. I am outside, and you can see the trees in the background. And I must first, though, give land acknowledgement. About 200 meters behind me is the Mattawa River. I am an honorary member of Doki's First Nation. People often ask me about my accolades and degrees. I say my highest honor is to be welcomed into Doki's First Nation as an honorary member, and that is my highest honor. And I have a tobacco pouch, I have an icon, and I think that's very, very important. The Mattawa River, as I say, before the settlers, the Meridian Trading Network was well established, and I'm grateful for the water. I'm grateful for the opportunity to go paddling. I have been paddling already this spring. And before the settlers, as I say, the Nipissing First Nation in particular were traders, and one of the main things they traded for was ochre. After that, the great English explorers, French explorers, Fraser, Thompson, Mackenzie, even Sir John Franklin walked the portage behind me. La Vérendrye, Radisson Groseilliers, the originators of the Hudson Bay Company. Nonetheless, we are on traditional territory. And I am, as I say, right behind me, and the beauty about being here at the Canadian Ecology Centre, and yes, I am outside because I am happy to say, and as Diana well knows, I'm surrounded by aerosols right now as we speak. And there's a lot of cheese, but the beauty of this latitude is that we're in the transition zone between the Great Lakes St. Lawrence deciduous forest and the boreal forest to the north, and I say that. So if you did read that New York Times article that was referenced, I think it's a good segue because I am surrounded by the trees, and you're going to be in for a treat tonight with Diana. Diana, right off the bat, I'm sure you're just slogging along. I know Chris is probably at that library down that way, and you're ready to charge out of the gate, so to speak.
Yeah, we're just flogging along. That's right, Bill. Yeah, well, absolutely right.
Yeah, well, it's always an honor to be in your presence, and you'll be up here in a couple of weeks at the Canadian Ecology Centre for our 7th annual -2 book talk, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you to be sure. And if anyone's interested, it's CanadianEcology.ca, Canadian Ecology, all one word.ca, if you'd like to come up. I'm going to start in with the first question. We're going to have more of a discussion, and of course we'll have Q&A at the end, as Mary said. But a little bit before we go into this whole tackling the environmental crisis together, we can, and I think because trees are our largest plants, and I just pointed to them, tell us a little bit, and again, we have a lot of followers listening and looking on, but tell us a little bit how you first discovered the many benefits of plants locally, because I think when we get to that, what can we do together? We have to find out what's in our own backyard, but what about your original backyard?
You mean the original backyard in Ireland, or the backyard here?
Ireland, and then you can transition a lifetime into your own backyard.
Well, I studied classical botany, as you know, pretty well everybody knows, and medical biochemistry. And I had the unfortunate situation where my family was wiped out when I was 11, 12, 13. And what happened to me is I was made a ward of court, and my mother's family are the O'Donohues of Castle of Ross. You can look that up on the internet, the ROSS in Killarney. And my mother's family decided that I should be given my inheritance because I was the last member to survive of the O'Donoghue Bearers. So I was made a Brehon ward, and for those who don't know about law very much, The Brehon laws are pre-Magna Carta, and they were the laws of Ireland. They were the laws, in fact, they were the laws of Ukraine once upon a time, because the Celtic civilization went into the Ukraine. Anyway, part of those laws was teaching me about the medicines of species. And I was brought, and I didn't think I could remember all of this. But when I went to university, I decided I'd do some detective work. So being a biochemist, I hit the biochemistry stacks in the medical library. And to my absolute astonishment, I found that all of the medical cures from Ireland from the ancient times were right. And then I came to Canada, and I did the same thing in Canada. In Canada, of course, I was doing surgery. And in the intervening time of doing surgery, I'd whip down to the library, which was downstairs at Ottawa U, take out a whole stack of books, disappear into the books, and start checking all of the medicines of the North American species. Then I found that the Aboriginal cures were all correct, one after the other, after the other, after the other. But the funny thing is, Bill, the very, very funny thing is that the cures that I was taught from ancient Ireland from 2000 years ago are almost identical to the cures that are used today by the Aboriginal people. And I addressed the Assembly of First Nations a number of years ago, and I went after all the medicine men and medicine women, and I asked them a question. I said to them, did you ever have people from Ireland in the ancient times come across to Turtle Island? Because we have legends of An Píor na nÓg in Ireland that the Irish did go on boats called badas, and the bada went to North America, and they said they had old legends too. So somehow, somewhere, we all met in the middle. And now today, we are also looking for medicines for all of us, because the fallout of COVID is an aspect of climate change. It means that our carbon in the atmosphere is too high, the viruses are too strong. And because the viruses are too strong, we need to do something. We need to go up to Bill. So you turn to the side, Bill, so I can see the Pinus strobus behind you. That is the pine behind you, and it has 5 leaves. So don't forget, that's the white pine. Pinus strobus, 5 leaves. Pinus strobus, 5 needles. So you go up to Bob, and then you go up to Bill, and then you go up to where he is, find the tree with the 5 needles, and then you tell him you found them, because they're all over the place, and you start doing some forest bathing. And what that will do to you is that it will protect your immune system and boost it for a month. So it's worthwhile. Boosting your immune system gives you a protection to cancer. It also protects you to the virus called COVID. So you go up and see Bill and really annoy him. Just really shake him up and really annoy him, because he knows where all those trees are. And I'll be up there in 2 weeks' time. And so we start with a riot.
Well, that is a good transition. And tell us about your own backyard where you and Chris reside, but at the same time, give us some tips about, because it fits right into the theme of tonight, what people can do in their backyards as well.
Well, my backyard happens to be 160 acres. So it's kind of a fairly large backyard, let's put it that way. And my husband, Christian, and I, years and years ago, we would go on expeditions. And we're talking like Winnie the Pooh, that he and I would get a flask of tea together. Of course, he had his cameras with him. And the poor man had to listen to me, and he did listen to me. And we started going around the forests all around our area. And I found, species. You see, When you're in Ireland, when you're in England, when you're in Europe, you never, ever, ever see forests like there are in North America. And I was boggled by what I saw. So we found, I had a bucket list. I produced a bucket list of about 20 species that I wanted to find because I had actually studied them and had taught them in Ireland. And I wanted to find those species and I wanted to see them from my own eyes. And one of them, oh my baby, oh, it is beautiful, the shagbark hickory. Oh my goodness, and the kingnut hickory. Once upon a time, these are heritage species. Once upon a time, these trees fed North America. The first yogurt and the first concept of cheeses and all kinds of foods that were extraordinary, high-class, first-class protein was produced in North America. And it was produced in the savanna lands of North America. And you know, one of these trees, the kingnut hickory, which is the same as the pecan, I have been looking for that, for the seeds of that, for 25 years. And I found the last tree. And today and yesterday, I have the second generation. I have a birth announcement to make. My birth announcement is that one of those seeds has broken dormancy, and I have a pot about this size, and I have an epigeal germination coming out of it of a kingnut. So you can congratulate me because that's number one for me.
Wow, that's amazing.
Now, let me tell you what kingnuts do for you. Please, all of you folks, listen very carefully. The nut fruit, the nut meat, the nut kingnut, and the shagbark hickory, the shellbark hickory, all of the hickories and the black walnuts, you have 4 or 5 of them a day. And if you eat them with your lunch during the summertime, you have in them, you have ellagic acid, you have linoleic, and linolenic acid. It actually protects your brain. It's the building, they're the building blocks for your brain. So you will not have Alzheimer's, you will not have Parkinson's, you will not have mental diseases because you're eating food that supplies your brain and keeps you smart, just like Bill is. He was in his canoe going down the rapids and the river. I know the man is a madman, but down the river, cracking down the river, he was eating his nuts. He was eating his black walnuts and all of the nuts. You see, the Aboriginal people did not have these diseases. So all you have to do tomorrow is blackmail your husband or blackmail your children, go out and buy some of these nuts and eat 1 or 2 or 3 a day. Ignore all the laughs, but you'll be the smartest in the end, just like Bill.
That's it. That's sage advice. That's sage advice, Diana, to be sure. I have to get more than, and the rain's really coming down, but I'm under this shelter here and we've got weather warnings in northeastern and northwestern Ontario. But nonetheless, a personal belief is you can't do anything for the environment until you do something for yourself. And you've just kind of nicely led me into this question, is that what are some of the things people can do if we're going to fight this environmental crisis? As we know, we have to all do something about climate change. What are some of the things other people can do? And I guess my cue is, of course, that whole aspect of forest bathing and the aerosols. I think we'd be remiss if you didn't talk about that.
Well, let me not be remiss. And let me say something before I mention the aerosols and mention the medical trees, the medicine trees of the First Nations, because the First Nations looked after them. Let me say something first. We are a splendid country. Canada has got a canopy like no other on earth. The United States has had a canopy like no other on earth. The trees are, from an evolutionary point of view, they're equivalent to the human body. We cannot exist without the trees. We cannot exist without the oxygen produced by the trees. But we happen to have a global community of politicians all over the world, and Canada is included. They are not interested in climate change. And you, as the voting public, you have got to make our politicians aware that you are worried, not maybe for yourself, but for your children and your grandchildren into the future, because climate change is upon us. Speak to anybody in Winnipeg right today, and they will tell you what is happening in Winnipeg right today. It is going to be a big problem there. And that's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of something that's happening. So when I write to the Prime Minister of this country, I get letters back saying, thank you for your interest. When I write to the environmental ministers, I get back, thank you for your interest. When I go to Ireland, the President of Ireland, he pats me on the back and tells me it's fantastic. So do the German ambassadors do that with me. So happens in Japan. You have got to put fire under the politicians in this country. You've got to do it. So we're all women. Sorry, Bill. This is women's talk here now. We're all women. I know, go away for a minute. And you know how cunning we can be. So please do something about this. So now let me address the situation of aerosols. It's very, very important. When I was starting, well, let me go back one tiny little bit in my educational pathway. I am the person who has made the artificial blood for Canada, and actually all the major medicines all across the world want this. It is being used for organ transplants in the human body, and it is also being used across the world for the delivery of anti-carcinogenic material into the body to treat cancers. So I'm very, very interested in the parallel situation that is between the species of medicines that are in the trees of North America and how they have been used by the Aboriginal people, how they have been used in the ancient past in Ireland, and to look at them again and see, have we got anti-inflammatories? Have we got natural antibiotics? Have we got natural pain mitigation? Have we got all kinds of medicines in our forest? And actually we do. And within the biodiversity of our forests, this is what we have, because I have studied this. So when I started writing my first book, the University of Michigan Press started to get hysterical. They said, nobody has written about aerosols before. How can we put this into your books? How can we allow you write this into your books if we don't know about them? So what happened is they asked me to go all through the scientific community to find out, has anybody written about them? No, they haven't. Has anybody done papers about them? No, they didn't. So what I said, well, I'm going to talk to a publisher who owns a whole pile of publishing houses in the United States. And I said, his name was Bill Haney. And I said, Bill, you've got to stand up for me here because this is important work I'm doing. So Bill went to University of Michigan and said, look, listen to her. Then he went to Harvard, and my friend E.O. Wilson at Harvard said, for heaven's sake, listen to her. So I got that book published. First time it was ever published. That's a peer-reviewed book. So now let us talk about some of these things. If you have children, if you have grandchildren, and if you happen to be lucky enough to have a wife, then you will take those people out to a black walnut in September. In Canada, it is September. And what you will do is you'll ask your wife, you'll ask your daughter, you'll ask your granddaughter to pull up their sleeves like I'm doing right now. And you take a leaf of the black walnut and you crush the leaf in your hand until you get the smell of lemons. Now that's your indicator, till you get the smell of lemons. When you get the smell of lemons, you rub the leaf on the inside of your arm up to your elbow and the other arm up to your elbow. That gives you a protection of 1 month protection for breast cancer. If you happen to have children and grandchildren, you give them the raw nut, and the raw nut is the green nut now. And you get them to hold it and squeeze it in their hand as a worry piece. It protects against early childhood leukemia. It is that important.
Right behind me here, it's Pinus strobus, but the ground cover, and of course I do the same thing with sweet fern, which is very common around here. And we did that the last time you were up here with Nurse Nazneen. But I wanted to transition. I was just looking at the clock, and of course, speaking with you, we could speak for hours. But but let's transition into some action items based on tackling the environmental crisis. Let's talk about your thoughts about the Bioplan. Now, that's a lot of your most not recent history, but your whole life. But talk about the Bioplan, and then we'll go on to some specific topics.
Well, first of all, in the Bioplan, the whole concept of the Bioplan is we've taken down too much forest, because the forest, the trees are the top point of evolution. And what the trees do is photosynthesize, they harvest the sun. In other words, they harvest the photons from the sun and exchange them for electrons. And that's the free energy that goes into trees that actually makes a tree, as a matter of fact. But in the act of doing that, what a tree searches for is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because it's the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere goes into the tree that makes firewood, that makes wood, okay, makes the body of the tree. So what it does, the tree can do, we've only just discovered this, Bill, I mean, this is new research really, is that the wavelength of light comes in a straight line or in a wavelength. It lands on the leaf of the tree, and the tree is harvesting the sun, it lands on the leaf, and what it does is it goes into the leaf, into the palisade tissue of the leaf, breaks carbon dioxide into carbon, which goes into the tree, the body of the tree, and oxygen out into the atmosphere. Trees are oxygenators. They oxygenate the planet. We didn't know that until now. So if you want to run an experiment, all of you people listening, I'm going to have my beer now. If you want to run an experiment, hold your breath for 20 minutes and maybe for an hour. And then see if you survive that, because you do need oxygen. You thank a tree, and that's what you do. So we've taken down from the last 50 years, we've almost taken down a quarter of the whole global forest. And we didn't know it was so important. So there's carbon up in the atmosphere. It's causing climate change. The carbon is actually causing climate change, heating up giving the greenhouse effect. So listen here, you folks, this is a very simple thing to do. Get a tree, go and get a shovel, get a spade, put on a decent pair, take your high heels off, like just don't do this with high heels. We're not talking about a painting here, we're talking about you doing this. Get a decent pair of shoes on, get a tree, buy a tree, or get an acorn. Like we're talking very simple here. Plant a tree this year, plant 1 tree per person on the whole planet for the next 6 years. We'll have in the region of 50 billion trees, plus or minus, depending on how active you are. And there are people who are actually putting in huge amounts of trees now. I did the Bioplan for Israel. I did the Bioplan for India. So no, they're putting in huge amounts of trees. So they're sequestering the carbon out. It's done for nothing. It doesn't cost you anything. And then you smarten up. Then you smarten up yourself and you understand you cannot have everything in this life. You cannot have 5 cars. You cannot have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 houses. You can't have this. Go simple. Simplify yourself. Simplify everything you're doing. Don't be so demanding. Be rich in what you do not want. And you'll find, amazingly, you'll be happier. So that's the basis of the Bioplan. And the Bioplan is something that a good friend of mine, Akira Miyawaki in Japan, when I met him, Akira said to me and held my hand, and he's been planting pretty well all his life. He died in July. Unfortunately, he was a wonderful, wonderful man. He held my hand and he said, Diana, I'm no longer alone. There's two of us now doing this. So from there, I want to pass it all on to everybody. And it is happening. I wanted to get it on the road and get all the books on the road, because years ago, I said to David Suzuki, and this is 40 odd years ago, David me darling Suzuki, that's what I call him, and you can tell him that, I've always called him David me darling Suzuki. David, you take the high road and I take the low road. And David me darling went into television, as everybody knows, and I was the slogger, I was the turtle, I was the Irish turtle, plodding along, flogging along, as you say, oh, terrible, flogging along, and I wrote the books. And let me tell you, the books are damn difficult to write. And you know that, Bill, very well. You have to beat your head against the wall in Canada to get a book written. So I wrote the books, David me darling did the TV. So you have to listen up now, because the window of opportunity for climate change is disappearing. It really is disappearing. And those trees have got to go back in, and you've got to water them. You've got to look after them, and you've got to do for my terms, what I've done in my garden that you're talking about, my arboretum. I've gone and I've collected the rarest of the rare trees in Canada, cucumber tree being one of them, sacred tree of the First Nation being another, and all of the hickories, the Carria species, I've got all of those. So what I've been doing is trying to protect and propagate the trees that are almost impossible to do, so they'll be there for the future.
Yeah. And you've given them to the Hells Angels as well. That's in
Oh,
the New York
God.
Times article. But we're not going to talk about that story. We don't have time. But they'll have to come up in person to the Canadian Ecology Centre. But I'm looking at the clock as always. But there's some notes from our conversation this morning, our chat this morning. Talk about the lack of biodiversity in the 8 foods.
Well, basically, industrial food is not very good for you. Basically, all of you, if you're 50 and 50 years older, you should be eating organic food. What you need to do is cleanse out your body from all the industrial food that you've had. You know, I'm a medical biochemist, and in this way, I know what I'm doing. I do not have this knowledge. So what we have essentially, and I made a note of some of these, what we're left with industrial food has wheat in it, has rice in it, has maize in it, potato in it, barley, sweet potato, cassava, and grapes. They're basically the industrial foods that you're eating. And it's only 8 foods, 8 primary foods, primary plant protein is what you're eating. And it's not enough. So if you are 50 years or older, can I ask you to do something, please? Can I ask you to eat wheat germ? And wheat germ is alpha and beta and gamma tocopherols. And what the tocopherols do is they renew the muscle of your tissue. And they renew the memory muscle of your body itself. So if you have 1 teaspoon, just 1 teaspoon a day in your food, that really improves the quality of your health, especially for you gentlemen in the urogenital areas where you're very worried about. Please eat alpha and beta forms of alpha tocopherol. So that's all you have to do. Pop it into your cereal and off you go, and you're whizzing along, canoeing down the rivers and everything. But what we have lost is the biodiversity within our food. What we have lost are the xanthophylls in our food, and they're the coloring compounds in our food that go into the eyes and give you the ability to have eye clarity in your eyes as your eye starts aging from dark to light and light to dark. So, I mean, there are all kinds of things that I can talk about. And that's just one of them.
Well, another note, I was just looking down on my notes, and you wanted me to remind you to talk about the sanctuary of the seas.
Yeah, well, if you're going to fix the planet, you're going to have to go and look at what they're doing in Iceland. And in Iceland, they're setting up sanctuaries of the seas all around Iceland. And you notice the only fish in the stores right now is sustainably caught fish, which is caught on the edge, which is caught by the trawlers at the edges of these sanctuaries. But it gives the smaller fish the ability to grow and to develop and to become very healthy. What is happening in Canada is they're just going, the trawlers are just wrecking the oceanic floor out on the west coast and out in Canada, out on the east coast of Canada, and our fish are disappearing. So I would say to the Minister of Fisheries, will you please start thinking about putting in the sanctuaries of the sea around Canada, because I think the fishermen in Canada and of Canada deserve to have a future too.
I'm so glad to be here with you, and I know everyone else is. But another note that caught my eye is you want to talk about that incineration of plastic, because I think people will be really interested in that part of our discussion. Yeah. Well, well, this really kind of comes from my husband, Christian, because he had been looking and interested in these areas of incineration for really about 20 years. And I remember him coming home one day and being very upset. And I had tried to talk to Galen Weston about plastics, and that was about 30 years ago. I said to Galen, because I know the family, I said to Galen, could you not reduce the plastics, because they're very toxic for young children? And anyway, the way the world is going in Canada, of course, everybody wants easy things, easy plastics and easy things to do. But the amount of plastics now is extraordinary and it's terrifying. But remember now, to manufacture plastic, you need energy. But what you can do is you can incinerate plastic, and you can take the energy back out of the plastic and use that as a form of heat, or use that as a form of machinery, whatever way you want to think about it. But what you have to do with the incinerators is, in the bag houses, you have to have enough bag houses so that you are absolutely assured that the air coming out of the incinerators is totally opaque. That means that the air coming out of the incinerator is better in quality, air quality, than the air around you. And the government would not put in the couple of $1 million to really finely make these incinerators exquisitely perfect. Now, let me say another thing about this. This would get the plastic out of the atmosphere. What's wrong with Canada? Why can't we initiate research and development within this country and do this research within this country? Why can't we then do this whole phenomenon ourselves and then sell it to other countries? What is wrong with us that we have to bring in every single small little idea into this country? We've got brilliant people here, brilliant scientists. So I say, start looking up, babies, because I think our kids are real smart cookies, and I would like to see them coming up with good ideas in Canada. Well said. Another note, just going down, is looking at soil transport. Yes, we're losing our soil. We lost our soil in the dirty 30s. Roosevelt really did a lot of things to protect the soil. But we don't know, you don't. Now I'm going to ask you, when you're driving around the countryside here, around Toronto, in any part of the country in Canada, you're finding that the small fields that were here in Canada, which we need actually as sections to save our soil, they're becoming oceanic fields. And in the oceanic fields, it means that all of the fertilizer goes out into the oceans. And have you heard of graveyards of the sea, where the sea is totally hypoxic? And the fish and the mammals swim into this area of no oxygen and die. And you hear about fish kills and you hear about algal blooms. What the farmers are doing on the fields right now with these huge oceanic fields is affecting all the oceans, and you don't even know it. So what I'm saying is, how about two-tier agriculture? How about putting in nut trees as boundaries in these fields and having an extra set of protein? Your protein from the field and the protein from the trees. Now, do you know another thing? And this is really upsets me.
when the First Nations, and this is their territory, this is not our territory, it's their territory, when they go looking for their medicines, and all of their medicines are all on the boundaries and the edges of the field, the boundaries have gone. Do you know that the First Nations people cannot even go to collect their medicines now because those fields are also sprayed? So we've taken their land from them, and we've also taken their medicine from them. So think about that. When you're driving in the country next time, look at the fields and say, there's something wrong here. And that's what's wrong. And I think we need to correct that also. That's one other little item.
Tell us about, and as I know we're going to take Q&A in a few minutes, but you want to kind of end off this particular segment with that aspect of the sacred center of being and the importance of the trees.
Well, the trees have taken about 600 million years to grow and to perfect themselves, right? The trees dictates our DNA. Us as a human family, because we are all related, believe it or not, we have taken maybe 2 million, 3 million, who knows, so many million, because they're coming up with different figures all the time. Our DNA is almost the same as the tree's DNA. We only lack 2 bases in the spiral replication. That's all. So I would say that you and I, when you and I go into a forest like the forest you have around you there, we're going into the cathedral of nature. But the cathedral of nature also teaches you something existentially about yourself. You go in and you are isolated from everybody because the trees make sure you're isolated. You go into a community of the forest. And when you go into the community of the forest, you are aware of body, mind, and soul. The body is being fed, hopefully, by your kitchen table. Mind, you're being fed from the forest by your mind. The forest protects your mind. The alpha and beta pinene from the pine tree behind you actually has an effect on the myelin sheath. Tracking in the body has effect, especially on children, on their brain capacity and their IQ capacity. So it affects the mind, and the existential part of it, going into the cathedral of the forest, the silence speaks to the soul. And you're only half a person, only a half, maybe a third, especially if you're Irish. It may be a third of a person if you don't recognize there is some divinity, and I don't care what religion it is. There is another power greater than us, and you are very aware of that. When you go into the forest, you're very aware of that. If you talk to any of the Aboriginal people, and they are stunning in what they understand about existential thinking, they are extraordinary people. So you have a forest, you have body, mind, and soul. That's the Celtic triad.
I can't prove it. Richard Love talks about vitamin N, but I've been talking about vitamin N for nature my whole life, but that just fits in with your philosophy, and that's one thing I've learned from you over a number of years. Now, Mary, I'm very conscious of the time, and I see it looks like there's at least 8 questions. So if you want to handle, we'll transition into the questions, and then we'll come back for some probably final thoughts before 8 o'clock. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mary.
Okay, well, I've been looking at the chart here. We do have 8 questions. I think each one would require, quite some time. So I don't think we can cover them all, but I pick out a few. The first one is, I have many friends who, with me, have sent countless letters to politicians. It falls on deaf ears. Perhaps this is no longer working. Money and power talk. They are what is heard. What new ways might we find to make our voices heard? Do you have any thoughts on that, Diana?
I do have thoughts on that. And let me tell you something that I've done. I did the press releases for the people, for the kids who were looking after Fairy Creek, all right, up and out in Vancouver. Then in my name, a very wealthy woman, and it was a woman who gave the monies for the court cases, right? And then I turned around and I did the first paper between Italy here in Canada and Georgia, Russia, on the importance, medical importance of those great forests, and put it into the hands of the lawyer, put it into the hands of the judge. So you have to be, look, you have to be cunning. You have to do it differently. And I'm telling you something, that if you arrange a letter, if you ask me to write a letter to the politicians, if they get enough letters, because I've proven that, it's an actual fact. If we get, I don't know how many people who are there with you today, Mary, I don't know, maybe 200, 300, 400 people. All of you get your best friends, get 5 or 6 or 10 people to send a letter to Parliament. You mean to tell me that they would ignore maybe 1,000, 2,000 letters coming into their bureaus? Absolutely, they would not. Absolutely, they would not. And I'll tell you, you and I and the women listening to this, we represent 50% of the planet's population, and we are the caretakers. And if we don't bother to write a letter, I'll tell you something, I'm sorry about you gentlemen, the men won't bother, because it's the women who are the caretakers. So I say, keep writing your letters.
Thank you. Thank you for that impassioned response. Maybe a quicker one for you. Would black walnut not also work on males? They also get breast cancer. You talked about rubbing the nut.
Well, I'm afraid if a man gets breast cancer, it's a very dire situation for a man. So if you can get your gentlemen friends to do the same thing, which I'm sure they would be happy to do so, then I think they should do that also. But let me address the gentleman. If you happen to be visiting the United States and if you happen to be around redwoods, can you please in the early morning take a walk around redwoods? And the redwoods produce taxodione compounds, which cause the cancer, which is responsible for the prostate cancer in males, which is very, very, very serious situation for men. 9 out of every 10 men, if they live long enough, will get that kind of prostate cancer. Will you please take an hour out of your life and walk around those trees, the redwoods I'm talking about? Breathe deeply, take as many clothes off as you can, obviously not your trousers, but you can take off your sweaters, you can take off your shirts, please, and have your hair open to the air, and don't wash yourself. Don't shower for at least a day afterwards, so that the aerosols, the taxodione, goes into your skin, goes into your sebaceous glands, goes into your body, and is received by your body. It causes a form of suicide to take place between resident compounds that are responsible for that form of cancer.
This is really fascinating stuff. But to get back to the questions, Diana, can you comment on the tree cutting that's begun on Ottawa's Central Experimental Farm and Queen Juliana Park? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. In order to build a mega hospital. Among these trees are many that are over 100 years old, including the white pine, sycamore, shagbark, hickory, walnut. What can we do? Is this a letter writing campaign again?
Oh, no, you can't. No, look, that's been in the works for maybe 10 years. And they tried to bring me on board for that. And it is really too late. But if you want to stop the cutting of the trees there, you can do a butterfly situation with them, and you can have maybe 100, 200, 300, 400, maybe 1,000 women around those trees to prevent them being cut down. But that is on the books right now. And you know, we can maybe make arrangements that if they're going to cut down those trees, 1 for 1 for 1 for 1, or in Ireland it would be 5 or 10 for 1, then then Jim, you know, the mayor has got to put those trees in somewhere in the city and protect them in the city. I raised $1 million for the city, $1 million to plant 1,000, I don't know, it was 1 million trees, I think, that was supposed to go into the city of Ottawa. What happened to that money? Why aren't they planting? Why aren't they planting trees? So there is an attitude, and it is called a lack of education in the city per se, that we had a beautiful green city once upon a time, and they're eating into the area of the experimental farm. And I do know the family who are doing that, and they're in South America. And they said to me, we can wait. So there are greedy hands waiting and just spending time to get their hands on that property of the city of Ottawa. I do not want that to happen. I want to have an experimental farm in the city of Ottawa. And yes, I would like to see those trees. So all you can do really right now is go up to the council meetings and put, you know, petitions in. But that was in the works secretly for a long time. And I don't know that it's too late. The answers I'm giving you, I mean, it's a disgrace. It is really a disgrace. But the thing is, then you come after them and you say, they're taking down 600 trees. We want you to plant 6,000 trees, and you pay for them and you put them in.
An interesting question. From Fran Harding, I live in Ottawa. To your knowledge, can individuals plant trees in their green belt?
I don't know about that. I just don't know.
Oh, okay.
I really don't know.
And a very short question, but probably lengthy answer. What about the honeybees?
Oh, well, you see, there's another thing. The spraying of honeybees, the spraying of the compounds, the herbicides and the pesticides and the insecticides. Look, there's a whole thing about honeybees. Now, not just honeybees. Let's take all of the 3,000 or is it 34,000 natural predators that are around, or natural pollinators that are around, that are used in the farmers' fields, used in our crops, used everywhere. The whole lot of them are susceptible to damage by the herbicides, fungicides, and the compounds that are being sprayed on fields. But as well as that, honeybees and all of the pollinating bees need food. What they need is lysine, the amino acid called lysine, L-Y-C-I-N-E, that lysine that the mother queen requires for laying her brood. That is not available to any of the pollinating insects right now, because all of the natural systems of flowers all around the city and in the countryside too are not there. It's like you and me. We have to have our breakfast. We have to have our lunch. We have to have our dinner. The pollinators, the insects need that too, and it's not there. So in our grab for making more money out of farming, are us people paying less money for food, we've come into a really catch-22 situation with our pollinators. So I would say, buy organic food. You don't have to buy all organic food, but try as best as you can is buy local, from produce local. And when you're buying your food, say to the farmer or say to the person selling, I want to protect the honeybees.
Okay, these are exhaustive answers, and each of them provokes more questions. So we're getting close to the end of the hour, and
you know, Mary, there's something here. There is something here for all of us. All of us. Life is a web. We're caught in the web of life. All of us, you and me, and all of the audience in the web of life. We have got to somehow be able to get together, the whole lot of us, and untangle that web and fathom out what we have to do to make life on planet Earth easier for us right now and easier for our children and our children's children, because it is vital that we do that. It is vital that we have education about this and that we understand that that can happen. And there are answers to every single situation because we made them. If we made these mistakes, we can fix them. Every single one of them.
Okay, there's one question left, and we just have a couple of minutes. So it was on Bill's original list and he didn't get it in. So I'm going to say it. What's next for you, Diana? What's next on your agenda?
Well, right now, I have finished a book called The Soul of the World, the Anima Mundi. I've just finished it and my husband has to do the editing on it. So that's that one. I am today signing contracts with publishing houses, the top publishing houses in Paris. And after that, I'm online for a film company. They're going to do a huge film on my life, and it will be between Canada and Ireland. And that's that. And then after that, if there are enough years left in my life, I would like to be able to do stem cell, and I've started this already, a stem cell collection of all of the trees of planet Earth as a fail-safe, just in case we have a disaster. And there's a disaster going on right now in the Ukraine, just in case we have a disaster, because we need those trees. It takes 600 million years to grow them, but it only takes a second to go and collect them, put them and keep them at -40 indefinitely, just like the female eggs. If a woman wants to preserve her ova, she can do it. It's same technique. We can do that. You see, Mary, we can do all these things, but it just means that we just have to know about them. And even if I'm an old woman, I'll be able to direct that. So there you go. Now you've got all my plans, and probably make a decent apple pie for Easter too would be another thing.
Well, your energy and your commitment are absolutely inspiring. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to say, after your fascinating discussion, how can we think that there's an immense value in every plant in this planet? How can we be dismissive of forests, as you've said? How can we think of them as a swath of trees that spoil the view? How can we not see the richness and
can I add,
and
Mary, can I add
Yeah.
something to you? Can
Please
I add
do.
something to this? All of you people listening, you should have seen Call of the Forest, my film called Call of the
Right.
Forest. And it's only one of 9 films that I've done, actually. It has had more bottoms on seats than any film has ever had since the beginning of the film board in 1972. And that is starting to go viral around the world. So
Yeah.
don't tell me one person can't do a lot.
Well, what you have done is impressive, and I have seen that movie, and it is inspirational. So if we allow them to, our forests can feed us, they can heal us, and they can help us save the planet.
Yeah.
So how can we allow the abuse of our forests to continue? And you're right, we have to get ourselves organized and we have to do something. You've given us so much to think about this evening. We have heard you speak for the trees, and now it's time for all of us to speak up and take some action. So the first thing is learn about your Bioplan and start planting our own global forest. And I went to a David Suzuki presentation by RTO a few weeks ago, and he said, and I thought this was so good, do something, don't do nothing. Yeah. And that's the least we can do. We all have to get together and say, what can we do? What is the something that we can do?
Yeah.
I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure having you here and having you, Bill. And maybe there'll be a stampede up to Mattawa in a couple of weeks.
Oh, he'd love that. Oh, he'd love that. And I would too. And Bill makes really good fires, and we'd all sit around the fire and gas bag, and I'd have a drop of whiskey. So I didn't say that. I'd have a drop of whiskey.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that with breathless anticipation.
All the best to you, Bill. There's always trouble when we get together.
3 thumbs up.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
both of you. This
you,
has been
Mary.
wonderful. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Oh,